Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark with the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1924 Soviet propaganda film Strike. Hey, hold on. There's no need to get violent. I think this is going to be a pretty good review here. That is, if you are not passionately in love with this movie, because I was not a huge fan. I will be perfectly honest. This movie was directed by Sergei Eisenstein, who also directed the Battleship Potemkin. This movie is on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list. It takes place during pre-revolutionary Russia. Some problems I have with this movie. So the middle is completely confusing to me. There's a specific sequence that I'll bring up later that I don't know what was going on and why it was even in the movie. And I think I paid pretty close attention here, but I was lost during this whole scene. And at the end of the movie, there is a particularly grotesque sequence of events that happens, which I think is what the movie is most famous for and is what is most known for. But I absolutely hated it. I am a huge animal lover. There's a lot of things that happen with animals and imagery of animals in this movie, and I just could not stomach what was going on at the end. I believe it's to show the plight of the factory worker, the chaos that was going on at the time, the injustices that was happening to not only people but to also animals. That's what I got out of it, but I don't know. Like, I was lost as to why it was happening and why they needed it to happen. It was just completely chaotic and crazy and terrible. I absolutely was not a fan. That's not to say the beginning doesn't have some problems as well for me. So the movie opens up when we're introduced to a group of spies. Now, I honestly don't know if the spies work for the factory people or for the upper management. I can't tell. But we're introduced to these spies. They all are named, or they have characteristics of animals, meaning they look like animals. So one is called the owl, and they show a picture of his face, and then they superimpose an owl over it, and then they go back to his face to show that he indeed looks like an owl, and that'll be his nickname for the later half of the movie. Because after they introduce these characters with no real backstory, they forget about them throughout the entire movie until the end, where they reintroduce them, and I have absolutely no idea who they are. I forget who all these people are. I can't tell just by looking at them, because the movie is so fast-paced and there's so much chaos going on, and there's so many scenes of people running, and the running is sped up, and people everywhere are moving so quickly. Every scene in this movie is like sped up like 2 times. I don't really know what the speed is, but it's at least 2 times the speed of everything is happening, and these characters are flying by the screen so fast that I have no idea who the owl is or who any of these other spies are. They just get completely lost in the shuffle, and I have no idea why they're even introduced in this movie as special characters, because you have no emotional ties to them. You don't care about what's going on, besides the fact that you care about what's generally happening to these people in this factory. You don't singularly care about any of these characters or what's going on with them, except maybe the guy who's in charge, like the ringleader of what's going on in the factory. But these spies, you could care less about them. At least me, they're just throwaway characters, but they spend so much time in the beginning saying who these people are and superimposing animals over their face that I don't understand why that had to happen. But after all that happens, we are shown the plight of the worker in these factories. They lead miserable lives. They get very little pay. They're treated terribly by management. There are children who are working in these factories, so they're using child labor as well. And one day, there is a very expensive part, a machine part that is stolen from one of the workers, and he says, I think at some point in this movie, that it would be 3 weeks worth of pay for him to pay back and rebuy this machine part if he had to. So he is very concerned that it was stolen and he won't be able to repay if he has to. So he goes to management and he says, hey, look, this machine part was stolen from me. I don't know what to do. And management immediately accuses him of stealing it and says that they have to take away his pay, and that he's going to be he's going to have this terrible reputation now at the factory because he has stolen from the upper management. Now, this gentleman cannot take this financially, and he also can't live with the fact that everyone that he works with is going to think that he stole this part, so he commits suicide inside of the factory. Now, the workers who come and find him, his lifeless dead body that is hanging from the factory ceiling, they decide that they're going to go on strike, and they mobilize the fastest strike I've ever seen my life. Like, it's like they were prepared for this. But I think before this happened, they were already thinking about going on strike. They were already mulling over this idea, so they might have already had like plans in place, and then they just like put those plans into place right when this guy killed himself. So they end up going on strike, and they like seal off the entire factory so that no one can leave, and so that like no one in management can leave, and so that they have like the upper hand here. And then they decide to like kidnap the manager, it seems like, put him in a wheelbarrow, and then dump him into a ditch. And then after that, they decide that they're going to try to negotiate what they want. So part of it feels like they have this plan of how they're going to shut down the factory and how they're going to get everyone in place to where they want to be. But then it kind of like falls apart after that a little bit, to where they don't really, they have this mob mentality where they're rushing management and they're trying to get to management so that they can get them in this ditch and like show them what's what. But then after that, they kind of just sit around for a little bit, and then they decide they're going to talk about their demands. I think their demands are an 8-hour work week, a 30% increase in pay, an 8-hour a day work week, so 40 hours a week, like what we have now in the US, basically, for most people, not for everyone. 30% pay increase, a 6-hour a day work day for children. They don't ask that children just don't work. They just say, can they only work 6 hours a day? And then for management to treat them fairly, which is not really like a actionable demand. Like there's no, I mean, that's very up in the air about what fairly is. So that's their one demand that I don't actually understand how that could be enforced. Like fairly for one person is not the same as fairly for another. So I don't think they really thought that one through very well. So they send their list of demands off to the bigwigs and wait for their reply. Now after this, there's some weird sequence in the middle of the movie where there's like this little person. I mean, you would call him like I guess the not politically correct term would be like a dwarf or a midget or something, but a little person, I think, is what we use the word for now, where he is like some sort of king on a throne or something, or there is a king in this city who is like king of this city, and his people in the city live in like barrels in the ground or something, and they decide to like cause chaos and set this building on fire for some reason. I don't know if they were just trying to rise up against the establishment, and that's the way they decided to do it. But I didn't understand why he was there, and like why this whole sequence happened, and what it meant for the main storyline of these factory workers trying to rise up against management to get the sort of what they believe they deserve. Like, I don't know how that ties into the storyline, but somehow it does. But back at home with the people who have gone on strike, they're not making any money now, so they're trying to sell things. We see images of children begging for food because they don't have anything to eat since their dad hasn't been paid, and I think one of them ends up like eating a bag or starts eating like a cloth bag or something. But you definitely feel for these children and the fact that they are literally begging and crying on the ground, hungry, starving, nothing to eat. The father didn't seem like he really cared, to be honest. He was very like, whatever. Like, he gave her like a cloth bag to eat, and he's like, oh, get out of here, kid. Like, he didn't really seem to care at all. Now, at some point, the people in the factory, well, let's backtrack a little bit. When the managers get the note that these people are striking and of their demands, they kind of laugh it off and say, like, these aren't demands that are... They meet, it's like a board of directors meeting where there's like 4 of them. 3 of them are like obese, so they're actually like fat cats. smoking, drinking alcohol. That one of the guy he drops something on his shoe, he like spills something on his shoe, and he takes the list of demands and like cleans off his shoe with the list of demands. So they're not taking it seriously. They're just going to tell the factory workers, no, like we're not going to do this. But then at some point, like one of the buildings gets set on fire. That I believe these factory workers are inside the building, and they end up causing some sort of like chaos to where the management group ends up sending in some sort of like, they call the police, and the police come with these like water hoses and water hose all the people from the factory who work there down, and the factory workers end up getting like caught in this like maze, not being able to get out. There's a lot of fighting at the apartments where these factory workers live. The police have come into the apartments, and now they're like fighting the factory workers. And one of the police ends up picking up one of the children like on one of the high stories of the apartment, and just like drops her and like kills her. She drops like 8 stories and just dies. It's like so weird. It's like, I realized that these children are going through a lot. There's a lot of like, the management is doing really bad things, and these people who live in these apartments are suffering. But that was just, it was kind of out of nowhere, and I was like, it was very shocking. I was like, oh, like Jesus, did this girl just die out of nowhere? And then the end of the movie is kind of like all of the factory workers being killed by the police, but there's also like cats that are hanging by nooses, and at the same time a cow is being like decapitated on screen. And I'm pretty like, I don't know for a fact if this cow is actually being killed on screen. I actually don't normally do research after watching these movies or before. I just watch the movies and like do a review. I did some research, tried to do some research on this, and it seems like the cow is actually being butchered in real life on screen, which is just terribly crazy and like horrific. And I didn't even, like, I had to turn my head, and it's such a long sequence, and it's so important at the end because it's where all the factory workers are being killed. So if like you want to see the big dramatic scene at the end of the movie, you have to also watch this cow being slaughtered for no reason. It was just so weird. It's like, this is how not to deal with a strike, I guess. Like, this is the weirdest strike I've ever seen in my life. Now obviously it's in Russia, and it's from over 100 years ago. They did things differently back then. It just seems like it's going to be really hard for this factory to employ anyone else after killing an entire town of people. Who are they going to find to work at this factory after they just killed everyone in the whole town who like worked at the factory? That seems like what happened. Maybe I got the whole ending wrong, and like these people actually didn't die, but it seems like this whole factory of people died. And it's like because they demanded better working conditions. So yeah, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of it, especially the end. The parts where the cats are hanging from nooses. The whole cow scene is just ridiculously grotesque, and one of the worst things I've ever seen on film, to be honest. I will say that I appreciate the movie showing the plight of these people. The children crying for food is like a scene that is, it's hard to watch, but it's also very impactful. It's a very touching scene. It's a scene that you won't forget. A lot of the scenes in this movie are just scenes that are probably going to be ingrained in my mind forever. So there are elements of this movie that I appreciate, that you can definitely, I mean, they definitely show you the plight and how hard these people's lives are and how terrible they are compared to the rich aristocrats and the head honchos of this company. It really shows that dynamic really well. But other than that, I'm not a fan of this movie. It's a 4 out of 10 for me, and I honestly think that's generous. That's just because of the, like I said, showing the dynamic between the two. Otherwise, it would be a lot lower. And I know when I have these movies that are really famous, that people love, and I don't like them, all I get is hateful comments about how I don't know anything. So if that's what you want to do, go ahead. But I wasn't a fan of this at all. 4 out of 10. Thank you. Have a great day.